Hi, thank you. Thank you to KEA for inviting me to Korea to come talk to you today. Thank you for listening. This is a talk called Hype or Hero, and it comes from collecting up some 30 years of experience in my field, which is many names. My field could be called lately spatial computing. It's been called XR. It's been called the Metaverse. It's been called augmented reality, virtual reality. All those things are part of it, including AI. And so I'm going to give a talk today that tries to tie those things together and explain very carefully, if I can, what things are real and what things are what I would call BS. They're things that people like to hype, but they're not necessarily what's actually happening in the field. So there's a lot of people that like to talk about this. I'm going to try to give you my perspective, given the experience that I have. So just a little bit of background on the XR Guild. Very quickly, it's a nonprofit that is dedicated to the ethical development of these fields. So we invite people to join if they're passionate about trying to make products that are great for humanity, not just great for the bottom line of money, but really help people. And so we collect members who feel the same way. The other company, Reality Prime, is my consulting company, and that's what I do for money. The other one is for giving back for the nonprofit. Throughout the talk, there are QR codes. They link to other talks or other information that you can follow up on. So a few years ago, I decided to make a chart recording at least my memory of all the hype cycles of ups and downs in the industry, because of course there's been more than one. I remember several VR hype cycles, several AI hype cycles. And I put it in this form because you sort of forget the context over time. If you just watch, for example, the Gartner hype cycle, they just show you where everything is on one curve. I wanted you to see how it looks over time, because what you'll notice is that when one cycle peaks, another cycle is coming up, and there's always something. There's always something at the top of the list that's being hyped. Today it's AI. A year ago it was the Metaverse, and there have been other hype cycles before then, going all the way back to virtual reality and the information superhighway. These are all buzzwords, these are all jargon, but there's something behind it. And what we're hoping is that this stuff leads at least to the future of information, if not the future of work. Probably not the future of everything, because I think the future of everything is social and people. But technology can certainly help. So this is where I started the chart, right when Facebook had renamed themselves Meta. And that was the thing that started the nosedive for the Metaverse, because Facebook kind of owned the name and nobody else wanted to be associated with it as much, because that was going to represent their take on things. We jump forward a few years, and today we have, I'm very proud to say, the launch of the Apple Vision Pro, which we'll talk about later in this talk. Apple didn't mention the word Metaverse once in their talk, which is very interesting. But they did introduce a term that's been around for a while called spatial computing. And it's a very important term, and I'm going to talk about why that's important towards the end of the talk. So here's the year in memes. For the young people in the room, memes are the way we communicate. So here's what's going on. First, the Metaverse is inflated, but it explodes. Boom. AI comes along and just drives right through that. It explodes. Boom. And all the Metaverse investors, the people who had gone long on the Metaverse, not so great. So those three things happened in the span of the last 12 months or so. But it illustrates an important principle. And I'm going to be calling out these principles throughout the talk. There'll be 3 laws of hype, and there'll be 5 principles that I'll get to on the last slide and summarize. This first one, the first law of hype, is that basically hype is hard to get rid of once you create it. It can only be exploded. It doesn't just go away. So be careful about what you hype, because it could come back to haunt you later. So Metaverse, not so much this year. AI has taken over. It's the new hotness. And so I decided to ask my special Avibot, that is my AI, to tell me about AI. Tell me where we are and what's going on. And the Avibot cannot lie, so it's going to tell me exactly what's going on.
Sure thing. As a large language model, I love talking about AI. AI is a tool. Worry less about evil AI agendas and more about lazy or greedy humans. For example, bad training data can make existing inequalities even worse. AI changes work forever. No more work. Just kidding. AI doesn't work unless people first create. Generative AI lets people create with the power of a billion creators. A billion creators are not being paid for this. Can AI help? AI plus ads will make money by manipulating you. We're moving from social media to personal conversational media. Ask, when does a given AI work for you or against you? Who is paying for it?
All right, thank you, Avibad. That was pretty on point, I hope. Now, everybody's talking about AI. There's a lot of people talking about how AI is a giant risk to humanity. Maybe the AI is going to take over and kill everybody. Or in a more close-to-home fashion, AI may be taking our jobs. So here is what Jan LeCun, who's in charge of AI at Meta, said. I think he may be right. I mean, I think the AI is mostly going to take jobs that are where a lot of money is going for something that is maybe repetitive or can be done very easily by computers. The thing I wanted to call out, thinking about ethics here, is that Jan LeCun specifically said, do not listen to people who care about the social consequences of their work. And I found that very questionable. I wanted to point that out because there's a lot of people out there who really don't care about the consequences of their work, and we're trying to address that because it's important that this stuff turns out right if we're going to keep sticking with it for a while. But that points us to our second law of hype, which is that fear often wins. It gets attention. The people who are creating the stories of the greatest fears are the one getting the most attention. There are a bunch of people in the field of AI who wrote an open letter saying, pause, we don't know, do you think this is going to kill us? And the reality is it's not really so much that the AI is going to suddenly decide to kill humans, it's that there are humans who take advantage of other humans who are going to be using AI to make that happen even more so. That's what we really have to worry about. So I wanted to just take a minute to explain something about AI that I think is really important, and it goes to some of the fundamental ethical issues of AI, which is the generative AI that we're so popular today, ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, and all those things. All the content in there was created by people, right? And so in a sense, we've taken all this human input, put it into a machine learning model, and come up with a synthesis. If I say, give me a cat, I get a cat. And that's great. If I can't draw, if I can't write very well, this can give me a leg up. This can give me a good way to do something that I'm not very good at. But more importantly, what is important about this AI to me is this is an area that I've been researching for a long time, for almost 30 years, is how do you get people to collaborate? How do you get people to work together when we're all so different? If you asked, and I've done this, asked 7 authors to write a story together, it goes in 7 different directions. It does not come together as a story. But somehow, using AI, we're able to synthesize a single answer that had billions of inputs, billions of different pieces of content were put together. Normally, you couldn't put 2 steering wheels on a car because you choose to go in opposite directions. You certainly don't want to do design by committee. But in a place where this did actually work was when I worked at Disney on the virtual Jungle Cruise ride. You were able to give every person a paddle, and 4 people could sit in a raft and paddle, and they could cooperate the way you would if you were doing this in real life. So there's something important going on here, but as I said before, we're still not paying the people who are creating these things enough. And what's really scary to me is not that AI is going to take over, it's the ways in which it can be used to manipulate us. So this, for example, is, I think, our perception of advertising today. And by the way, I'm going to say some harsh things about the way ads are used. I'm not against ads in general. There's free speech, and I think it's totally fine to advertise. But the way that they're used can be a problem. So this is how we think about advertising, that we are Superman and all the ads just bounce off us and we're not affected by any of it. It's just noise in the background. That's what we think. But what's going to be really clear pretty soon with AI is that it's going to be about us and our families and our friends. They're the ones that are going to be bringing the ads to us. You're not going to see dedicated 30 or 60-second ads anymore. It's all about, just like today's product placement, things will be inserted into our world using AR and VR technology to make it easy to do so. So here's a typical family with you in the middle. What do we see first? Well, the easiest thing to imagine is now the person who is selling I don't know if it happens here, but in the US on TV, there's a lot of ads for medicines. They want to get people excited about medicines. So you'll see some TV doctor come on stage and tell us all about the medicines, except now they're going to know who you are, so they're going to know what your conditions are. And they don't have to try to sell you a medicine for something that you don't need. They can be very targeted. That's very easy to see how that could be an improvement. But what's going to happen additionally is that people are going to be used for product placement. So if I was holding a can of any kind of soda in my hand, it could be replaced with a can of Coca-Cola digitally by the computer. You already see this happening in football games. You see the billboards are replaced electronically. It's only a matter of time before our social networking content is also replaced. And that gets a little scary because now my mother is advertising to me. My friends are advertising to me, perhaps without their knowledge or consent. So that gets a little bit scary. And so these are all the things that the companies, ad tech companies, are going to be looking at as our friends, our family, our attention, our behaviors. And the thing that I've learned about XR, right, this augmented reality, virtual reality, is it's very good at eliciting this information from us. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but because I'm wearing a headset, it knows where I'm looking, it knows what I'm looking at, it can predict my emotions based on other feedback, and so it's going to really know us very well. We're in a sense going to be trapped in this sort of, we call this a Skinner box, this a behavioral loop that's learning about us and trying to predict what we'll do, but also trying to manipulate us. And if you don't think that's bad, imagine it applied to politics, which has already happened. If you remember the Cambridge Analytica scandal, people took lists of voters and figured out who had a hot button issue, like who would vote for Trump only based on the question of abortion or only based on immigration. And so they were able to target people to get people to vote for someone else or not vote at all, and it can become very persuasive and very dangerous. So of course the AI companies are the first to say we should regulate AI, and it's happening. It probably will happen in other countries first, but it's happening in the US. But that's not quite enough, because these companies that say regulate AI are thinking in terms of like nuclear power and medicine, genetic engineering. That kind of regulation is good for the big companies, but bad for the small ones. So it creates something more along the lines of oligopolies. So we have to be very careful to not just do what the big companies want. We have to really think of what's best for society. So I'll make this bold statement and say that the connection between XR and AI is that XR is the interface to AI. AI is the back end, AI is the computation, but XR is the presentation part of it, the part that senses the world, the multimodal AI, and also allows the computer to see what we're doing. And it's also the part that we see and hear. And so it becomes the front end for it. And it's very important to get that right. It's all about context. It's all about what am I doing, why am I doing it, how am I doing it, how do I feel. That's where the computer's going to come in and try to help us. And this is what got me excited about this whole field 30 years ago when I started, was that if you remember the holodeck from Star Trek, it was this great place where the computer would listen to you and build whatever you wanted. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to tell stories and make movies without hiring 100 people. Just me and a few friends could make some amazing stories if only the computer was good enough. But it turns out it's not that simple, because the computer also needs to understand context. When I say the word tree, I might mean the kind of tree that I grew up with in New York, and you might think of a completely different kind of tree based on that word. So the computer needs to understand us well enough to know what we mean when we say something. It's also, we don't want the computer doing everything for us. We want to have some fun at this. We want to have some creative control. So we have to figure out how to get humans in the loop using the AI in a way that is productive. Now, this slide is a lot to unpack, and I apologize, but if you go linked to the original talk, there's a whole 30-minute talk I gave about augmented reality and about how personal it is. And I'm not going to be able to cover all of that today, but I'll give you a little bit of it. One is that all of the content in the world that we could imagine, think of the internet, but now apply it to the real world. On day one, it's a desert. There's not much information out there. There's no reason to turn on your magic AR glasses because there's nothing to see. But on day 100, there's too much to see. Eventually, it becomes from a desert to a jungle, and so we're going to need something that can filter those things, something that can only show us what we want to see and not see everything at once. So this little Earth I projected on the bottom is an example of that. And these are all AI functions. It's an important intersection of AI and XR. Now, the Earth at the bottom is jumbled in many different colors and shapes, but if we start using filters, we can start to see only the part of it that we want or need to see. Let's say, for example, I'm looking for a restaurant. I'm hungry. It's going to show me the best restaurants, but also know what I like. And so it's going to give me that. And it's important that the AI is working for us, because there's also going to be people out there who are listening to the questions I ask. If I say, show you the restaurants near me, to someone else, that's a monetization opportunity for them to send me coupons or ads. And so we're going to want a personal AI shield that can protect us from giving away this information involuntarily. Simply asking the question of a server, what's around me, can give away my intent and my location. So we're going to need a kind of a shield to protect us. And finally, what is this all for? The most important thing about AR and VR is bringing people together. It's about communication. And so I'm very passionate about this idea of holographic telepresence, which is let's all get together just like this, except none of us have to travel. We feel as real as we are today. We can talk to anyone we want to talk to. And it should be at least as good as face-to-face. Right? Maybe you can't all share a meal. That's important because you're in different locations, but you can at least have the feeling of being in the same place together. So I differentiate the world outside. We call those the verses, the things that are personal that only you should have are purses. The purses should basically be only seen by you and your AI. So that's an important principle. Here's principle number 1 of 5, is that whatever we build, it must work only for the benefit of the person using the device, the person who's wearing the device, and with their informed consent. And you see in the European Union now, the informed consent part is getting a lot of traction, that Facebook is having to stop opting people in to advertising. People have to explicitly say, I want this for it to happen. And that's a big change for them. By the way, transparency here is not enough. Some people say make it transparent what's made by an AI or where your content is going. It's overwhelming. Most people don't understand. Even the nutrition label on a candy bar is above where most people are in terms of understanding. So the idea that they're going to understand very complex privacy regimes, I think, is far-fetched. So we really do have to be thinking of them on their behalf and trying to do the best things for them. So principle number 2, remember I mentioned before that billions of pieces of content were being ingested into these AIs in order for them to generate new content for us. Well, who made that content? A lot of those people put their work out there thinking that they could sell it or they could advertise for their own services. And instead, the AI companies just took those things and has not rewarded any of the people who created the content. And much of that is copyrighted. It's not fair to use. What we have to think about is how to make sure that the creators are compensated. Because there's a practical problem for all the people who are taking the content. It is they take the content and then there's no more. Because who wants to create it? You already see artists saying no AI on their work. So the people who benefit the most, which are the platform holders, who are bringing in new audiences to use this content, really need to figure out how to share the wealth with the creators so that they create a thriving ecosystem and that people want to create more. If all the AI does is keep learning from what's out there, eventually it's going to become toxic because it's going to learn from its own outputs, and then it will crash because it will have nothing new to say. So to wrap up artificial intelligence with this section of the talk, hype versus hero, AI is a misnomer. It's really machine learning, but that's okay. Let them call it what they want. There's a lot of startups that are using it, but they're not doing anything that has an added value. They're just creating something on top of ChatGPT. And it's a wonder that those would exist in a couple of years because OpenAI can just do whatever they're doing. They don't have to keep all these companies around. But on the good side, XR and AI go together, makes content cheaper. It also allows us to create much more content more cheaply, which is one of the things that holds back spatial computing, is that it's very expensive to make content. So let's get back to the metaverse. There was I don't know if you were familiar with this, but there's a company called Walmart. It's a very big supermarket and buy anything kind of chain in the United States. And you've probably heard of Roblox. It's an online thing for kids to play games. They got together and they tried to build what they called Metaverse. Fast forward a few months, and they had a lot of problems with it. They realized they really didn't design it well, and they had to pull it because people didn't like it. And as of today, everyone's pulling back on using the term metaverse. So it's unfortunate that people rushed out there to put things that were not great out there so that people got a very negative impression of what that is. And it brings us to that third law of hype, and probably the most important one, which is you can pay all the marketing people in the world to promote your product, but reality always wins. You better have a good product at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how much you pay to advertise it. If people don't like it, they're going to go away. So this is a slide probably nobody in this room this is relevant to, but there are a whole lot of people that I know in the US who established themselves as chief metaverse officers and experts on all this stuff. And they proclaimed the future of all these things and how great they're going to be, but they didn't talk about the downsides and they didn't talk about how long it's going to take. And that has hurt companies. I have a bunch of people who have startup companies who are having a hard time raising money because all the money went to the hype and now everybody else thinks it's not real. So I think in general, let's not hype. That's my message here, is let's try to be sober about how we talk about the future so that we're not setting expectations unreasonably. Okay. So the years 1967 and 1969 were brought up in the earlier talks. I'm going to talk about 1968, which I think is the most important year, not just because it's the year I was born, but two really important things happened that year. One is Xerox Palo Alto Research Center showed the first demos of what would eventually become Windows and mice, 2D interfaces that are still ubiquitous today. And in the same year, Ivan Sutherland showed the first augmented reality display. Now, what's the difference between these two things? Well, 30 years. The difference is, actually 50 years in this case, the difference is the mouse is easy to use, especially the one-button mouse. You couldn't make a mistake. It was very easy for anybody who had never touched a computer before to use it. And augmented reality is incredibly complex. There's a lot going on. It's very hard to get right. So let's talk about that in interfaces. So I mentioned the mouse. The mouse has stuck around this long because it is so simple, and the prices have come down so that you can buy a mouse for $5, and it'll run on a very tiny battery for 6 months, and the technology is fairly close to perfected. But AR is at the beginning stages. We're nowhere near there. And in the middle, we have keyboards and we have phone screens. All these successful things have very similar rules to them. One is it's the minimum effort for the maximum gain. So the mouse is a good example of that. You don't have to raise your hand up. You don't have to do anything strenuous. And the most important thing is that it has clarity and utility. All right? Those are going to be true of any successful interface. Unsuccessful interfaces that have been tried are things like using a pen to write on a screen. It still happens. People do have those. There's, Apple sells Apple Pencil. It's still there. But not everybody's doing those things because it's not good for everything we want to do. Minority Report was a great example. We're going to all hold our hands in the air and go like this as part of computing. But the reality is you get tired after 5 or 10 minutes of holding your hands in the air. So that's not the best interface either. Google Glass, they tried. It was also not a very good interface. And the picture on the right is of a great video by my friend Kiichi Matsuda that showed what the world might be like in what he called hyperreality, where everything is inundating us at the same time. There's too much going on. That's where we need the filtering again. So things that are antisocial or distracting are just not going to cut it for interfaces. But on the other hand, there are some things that are going to work really well. And I've lost my picture down here. I don't know if you can get that back. So I'll talk about the Apple Vision Pro. We had a little bit of screen blanking going on there. So I was fortunate enough to work on the Apple Vision Pro from the beginning of the project for about 3 years. And it was an important exercise in trying to figure out what would be the answer to this question. What are the next computing paradigms in terms of hands and eyes and everything? And so you see a lot of very, I think, innovative things on the Apple Vision Pro. And I'm hoping you all get to try it really soon so you can see if it is indeed magical.
This is Vision OS, Apple's first ever spatial operating system. It's familiar, yet groundbreaking. You navigate with your eyes. Simply tap to select, flick to scroll, and use your voice to dictate. It's like magic.
Apple likes to use the word magic a lot. I think it is pretty magical, and as we developed it, we had that sense that we were onto something that was going to really stick. And I do personally think it is going to be the thing that replaces the mouse. It is going to be that we're going to be using our eyes, our voice, and touch as the next computing platform. And that's really what we mean when we talk about spatial computing. So the one thing they didn't do, other companies may be good at this, is not just vocalization, but sub-vocalization. I know NASA has worked on this. We need a private way of speaking out in public so that we can tell the computer what we want without other people hearing it. And so it's an interesting area of research I'm not going to spend too much time on. But I think it satisfies most of these things, and you'll see when you try it, natural, private, better than before, better than the mouse, and pro-social. So let's talk a little bit more about why that is the case. So we have all seen videos of some father accidentally hitting their child while the father was using VR. Not a great look. It's not a good thing to happen. VR takes us out of the real world, so Apple Vision Pro makes sure that we stay in the real world because you still see the environment around you. It's in your real space. And it also prioritizes people. You could be looking at a very important project on your computer, but if your coworker comes and tries to talk to you, their face will intrude, and then you get to talk to them. So people are always put first. And in terms of the eyes, it's a very interesting experiment. They've made it using a 3D display on the front of the glasses so that they can make it as if the glasses are transparent. So you can see the eyes of the person wearing it. That's very important for what we'd call joint attention in psychology. So people know when you're talking to them and when you're looking at them. And it's a big experiment. We're going to see sometime early next year how it works and what people really think of it. They also added this thing that I'm very passionate about called co-presence. I mentioned how AR is about bringing us all together. Well, right now we're co-present in the room together. We believe the other people around us are real, and we can interact with them as if they are. So that's really what co-presence comes down to. They talked about it, but they didn't really go into a lot of details, and I can't go into too many details because of non-disclosure, but I could say this, the things that are pretty well understood. It's best for small groups, one-on-one conversations. It's not meant to be the metaverse where everybody goes out to the virtual mall. It's similar, the avatars themselves, the personas they call them are similar, but what's important is they run on the device. It doesn't require a high-end PC to run it. I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but I would argue there's no such thing as the uncanny valley, if you've heard of that phrase. It's an uncanny mountain. The closer you get to real, the harder it is. So you don't just have to jump once, you have to keep climbing that mountain. And I'm going to talk about consensual reality in the few minutes that I have left. So let's compare and contrast. The metaverse this quote on the left is from Neil Stephenson. It's a spatial shared digital universe in which everyone sees the same stuff in the same place at the same time. That means it's objective reality. And so you could think of virtual planets and cities and malls and stadiums. Those are examples of objective realities. I want to contrast that with spatial computing is focusing on what I call the consensual reality, which is a small group of people who come together. Think of it like chat or a video call, where only the people that were invited are generally the ones that are talking. That makes it consensual. And you're not trying to bring everybody in, but you also want to bring in context. If I am talking on a video chat and I want to show somebody my new coffee mug, I will bring it up to the camera so they can see it. That's consensual context. This maps, very importantly, to the way we live our lives. In the global reality, we have things like law, and police, and punishment to deal with bad actors. But in the local reality, disappeared again. In the local reality, we have social norms. We have groups of people who essentially enforce the rules on their peers and each other. And so you have accountability from social groups. It's very different. I'd argue that on the right it's much easier to manage. The authority keeps us safe and regulates, but there's also risks. We can wind up with authoritarian regimes. We have to decide, do we want to be individualist or collectivist? But in local reality and social accountability, it's all much simpler because we're more like a village. We're more like a group of friends or a family. We know how to deal with those things, and we know how to deal when people misbehave. Not everybody, but for 99% of the cases, we can deal with that much better. And this is important because I think maybe it was alluded to before. Safety is incredibly important. No device is going to succeed if it makes people feel unsafe. There's a whole list of people who feel unsafe in various places. And these are the reasons why. And we've known this for years. For 30 years, we've seen bullying and abuse in online worlds. Nobody's really fixed it. And just having an AI monitor everybody is not enough to fix it either. That falls down on the authoritarian side of things. So now you have your robots are like the police, looking at what everybody says. It can have a very negative effect as well as policing the way people behave. So we have to be very careful of that. That's the way. Principle number 4, safety is non-negotiable. Any successful device, the wearer needs to feel safe. A very successful device will probably enhance their safety. It will be a positive feature, not just a negative one. Because the metaverse is going to be like society. Put any group of people together in any environment, whether it's physical or not physical, some people will misbehave. Some people will treat people poorly. Because they're people, because this is the way people act. Until someday when people change and we evolve, it's going to be the way it is. So there's risk. The risk isn't physical so much, but there's emotional risk. There's trauma that can happen in virtual worlds. We have to be very careful of. So all moderation has to be thought through carefully. It's a form of policing. You don't want to overdo it. And you also don't want to just automate it all the time because that leads to very impersonal reaction. So consensual reality, I argue, is safer. It's what people should be focusing on first when we're thinking of this future. Get that right, and then we can expand that out and include more people. So start with the trusted groups, mutually accepted rules. Everyone makes an investment. One of the values here is that when you misbehave in a social group, you forfeited the whole investment. You've put all this time and effort into relationships, and then if you act like a jerk, people are going to kick you out. So people tend to take that seriously. And mediation is sometimes needed, but not all the time. Okay, so we're getting to the end. Probably just another 30 seconds. This brings up a really important, I think, principle, which is that we can't trust automated systems to do everything for us. It requires people to come in and design things that are pro-social, not anti-social. The technology is not going to do it for us, but it can help. It can be a tool that we use. So hype versus hero, just to wrap it up. Very few people want to spend their time in any unsafe environment. That's just a rule. And the companies are unfortunately shipping unsafe things today, and they're going to not be as successful as they want them to be. But on the positive side, if people employ consensual reality, I think that's a way to win. That's a way to grow really fast. And you see that used in education, training, wellness, games. Those are examples of consensual reality that are all being used well. And so here's my final slide. I'm going to wrap up, and for the takeaways, we have the 3 laws of hype that you see up there, the 5 principles for XR and AI. I'm just reiterating what I already said, and if you take the QR code link, you can find more information on this topic. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for listening. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.